Hello again. This is session number 14 on ZeroS. It's the Early Adopters Program. This is a 14th session, and this will probably one of the last sessions before the reset. What do I mean with the reset? My plan is to announce quite soon a new series of another 12 sessions where we basically start from the beginning, which is clearly quite important for all newcomers, but I'm very sure that it will also be very interesting for all those that have been attending the very first 12 sessions, because of course things have changed during the last 3 months, and even during the sessions. During the session, we changed things that we already covered in the first session. So many things have been changing. Many things have been made better, have been made easier, has been made more sophisticated. And it really makes sense for all of us, so not just for the newcomers, to start from scratch and making sure that we, again, all get on the same page with a more holistic view on every single component. Of course, the new series, starting from session 1 again, will have better slides, because what I need to do is take my existing slides and simply make them better, more complete. And the same thing goes for the documentation. I will always use the session to update the documentation, to make the documentation more complete again. And as promised already in the first session, introduce more demos, leveraging, first of all, not just Linux, but also my Mac, and of course, Windows. And also leveraging things like VM workstations. That's also one of the things that I want to cover more and better in the new series. And furthermore, I'll also make sure, I was going to say try, but I will make sure that the sessions, in the next series, don't take 2 hours, but rather take less than or maximum 1 hour. So we'll make it more easy for everybody afterwards to watch the sessions. And that will, of course, be much more easy for me also, because I already did it once. I know exactly where I need probably more time than like 1 hour, and then I will probably split the session into 2 sessions. So that's the thing that I wanted to announce already today. With that being said, this session is about the Orchestrator. This session is about, again, installing the Orchestrator. So we already have been installing the Orchestrator in the past. What is different, though, is that this time we really plan to show you and give you all the details on how to install the Orchestrator, let's call it natively. Basically, install the Orchestrator on top of a ZeroS node. Until now, we always have been using Jumpscale 9 developer environment, typically the Docker container, in which we manually installed always the Orchestrator. Now, even while we won't be doing that again in the future, for those that have attended all the sessions about installing the Orchestrator manually in the Docker container, much of the things that you learned there still are relevant today. And some of these things won't be covered too much today, but still are important. What I mean there is things like that we in the background, when we install an Orchestrator, you typically also install an internal, let's call it, AYS server. So an AYS server that is only being used by the Orchestrator to get things done. It also involves the usage of multiple blueprints, like the bootstrap blueprint, the configuration blueprint, the networking blueprint, which typically then start AYS services, internal AYS services that are important for the Orchestrator to work. These components won't be discussed today. I will touch upon them a little bit, but I won't discuss them today. And I will also not show any screen showing you what AYS is doing in the background. So these things are all already been covered in the past, won't be covered today. And in a way, the installation will be more like a black box thing. But still, I'll make sure here and there that I touch these points And again, in the new series, I'll make sure that even while we will be using the more easy way of installing the orchestration, as I will introduce it today, that we will also cover again what exactly gets deployed by using the easy way of installing the orchestrator, or the native way of installing the orchestrator. So, once again, what will be covered today? So we will be using something new. Well, I won't be using it too much today, but I will introduce it to you. It's the Z tools. The Z tools is a new set of command line tools specifically developed for our own usage and for your usage, to make using and installing and setting up containers or full installations of JumpScale easy. It provides you a full set of Z tools. I won't discuss the Z tools today. I will only touch upon the command line tools that you will need to use in order to install JumpScale. For those that already have been attending previous sessions, installing JumpScale typically required you to use the the JumpScale / developer repository. Today we will be starting to use the JumpScale / bash repository, where the Z tools and the documentation that goes along is available. And then this session is all about installing the orchestrator. What is different about installing the orchestrator today is that we use an F-list. I'll explain you how to create these F-lists. I'll explain you where you can get an F-list which is pre-built for you to use, which we will be using today, by the way. And most importantly, I'll explain you how to install it using a script. A script that, as you will see, requires JumpScale. So from that perspective, still, you'll need an environment with JumpScale pre-installed. So you need to install JumpScale on your personal computer, your workstation, or in a container, a Docker container, for instance, which is what you do with the Z tools. And from there, then you will be running a script that I will show you, with a lot of arguments that need to be passed and a lot of preparation that needs to be done. But then again, this session is about that, in order to do that. In this session, we show you how to use the script. Clearly, going forward, in one of the next sessions, the script will be replaced by something else. Basically, what we will do in the future, we will be providing you, basically based on the same on the same script, it's basically the same code. We will provide you an AYS actor template, allowing you to have an AYS server that you install locally, for instance, and simply send a blueprint describing your orchestrator, the configuration of the orchestrator, send it to your AYS server, and have your AYS server install the orchestrator. So that will be the next step that I'll certainly cover most probably next week. This session is about using the script, so still the rather manual way, but at the same time a progress to what we had in the past, where you had to do a lot of manual things and use your Docker environment. I already shared this picture during the day, because this is actually what we will be doing today. As you see, it involves, first of all, to the left and to the right, two zero-tier networks. So the first thing you will have to do anyhow is create two zero-tier networks. This is a quite straightforward exercise. You create two zero-tier networks by visiting the zero-tier central environment, which is open here, this one, and you go to networks and you basically create a new network, you give it a name, that's it. It's quite straightforward. Yeah? Once that is done, the very next thing is that you have your computer, or in my case, I will be using a virtual machine that runs on OpenV Cloud on one of our G8 environments. And in that environment, that could be your Windows machine, that could be your Mac environment, that could be anything. In that environment, you make sure you have JumpScale 9 available. And that's where I'll come back to that. You probably will want to use this time the Z tools to have that done. Once you have JumpScale 9 installed, and the next step will be this thing here is join the zero-tier network. So you will join the zero-tier network, the very first one, the ZT1, you will join that network because the installation will be done through that zero-tier network on the ZeroOS. Now, the next thing is, as you will see, this one here, is that we make sure that we have somewhere a ZeroOS machine running. Now, this ZeroOS machine could be a virtual machine on VirtualBox. It could be a physical machine. It could be anything basically, as long as it's ZeroOS running somewhere. As you will see in the slides, in order to install a ZeroOS, you always need an image, a ZeroOS image. And as you will certainly remember, a ZeroOS image is something you download from the Bootstrap service. I'll come back to that. And as part of the download, you need to specify the zero-tier network that OS needs to join when it boots. And this will then typically lead to a situation where you have a zero-tier network, you have your local machine or your virtual machine from which you will do the installation, and both the ZeroOS that is there to host the orchestrator and your own machine will have joined the same zero-tier network. And from there on, we will then install the orchestrator. And as you will see, the orchestrator in turn, because of what the installation does for you, will also join both the zero-tier network, which is, well, strictly not necessary at all. And I'll come back to that. And will also join the second zero-tier network, which of course is the most important point, because the second zero-tier network is a zero-tier network where all the ZeroOS nodes need to be joined. Now, as I said, the orchestrator joins two zero-tier networks. The one which is the most important one is the one where you have the cluster, but also joins the zero-tier network that you have been creating, that you have been setting up first in order to do the installation. And that allows you not only to talk to the orchestrator directly through the zero-tier network, the container I mean, but you can, of course, and that's the whole point, use the RESTful API exposed by the orchestrator to get the orchestrator do things, for instance, from within Insomnia. That's clearly what you need to do. Now, this is, as I said, strictly seen not necessarily, because in reality, you might decide that the REST API, as I depicted here nicely, the REST API exposed by the orchestrator is a public API directly exposed through the Caddy server, which comes with this container, and is exposed on the internet. Of course, publicly exposed, you still will need an authentication that you will do through a JWT, which I'll discuss later. Now, this is the setup that we are about to create. This also means that the existing setup documentation, let me copy this link, the existing setup documentation is still there, but needs to be updated by myself. This is something that I will do tomorrow. So I will update this documentation based on what we will be covering today. Many of the things are still valid, but are still valid not for you to do manually, but are still valid for you to know what happens behind the scenes when you use indeed the installation script that we are about to introduce to you in a moment. Okay? So this is what we will do today. Now, to be a little bit open with you, I'm a little bit nervous. Why? As a preparation to this session, already created the orchestrator. I already installed everything, but I had something that didn't work, and I discovered something that I might have been doing wrongly. No, I will take a big risk, but well, what the heck? It's where we all learn most by basically reinstalling everything. And that might take a little while, but it's at the end of the day quite straightforward. And it's, I think, the best way to make it clear for you how it works. Okay, let's get started. Now, the first thing you need to do, as I said, is install the Z tools. Now, remember that we typically point you to Jumpscale on GitHub, and in Jumpscale we have this repository developer, and that's where we typically pointed you to in order to use. Remember this these tabs here in order to install. Remember, with the gig save and the gig dir and all the things you needed to do in order to install Jumpscale 9, for instance, Docker container on Windows or on Mac. As you can see, we are about to stop supporting this, and we invite you to switch to the Bash approach instead. And the Bash approach is just another repository under Jumpscale, and it is there where we introduce the Z tools, and that's what you see here. These are all the Z tools. It's a whole set of tools for making the life of people working with ZeroS and with Jumpscale easier through all kinds of command line tools to get things done faster. And of course, we do all these things in open source. So you will probably, some of you will probably want to check it out, maybe contribute or even correct things, as I know at least one of you already has been doing, right? So this is what I used basically. I'm not going to do it right now. I'm not going to use it right now. What I did in the slide, I only put on the slide the things I did to get it to work. And to be very honest, what I did was not the Docker one, so I don't have any Docker container running. What I did, I created a fresh Ubuntu machine on OpenV Cloud. Basically, this is this machine here. So in OpenV Cloud, this is, you could do it everywhere. I did it in one of our production environments, and there I created a cloud space. Remember, cloud space is the equivalent of what you typically would call a virtual private cloud, as they call it at Amazon. And in this virtual private cloud, or virtual data center, as we tend to call it, I created basically two machines. And the one that I'm talking about now is this, what I call the GS9 master. This was a simple Jumpscale, nothing pre-installed. It was a simple Ubuntu machine where I installed the Z tools. And once the Z tools were installed, with one single command, I installed Jumpscale. It was really, really straightforward. So, well, in my case, and I think we might want to discuss this offline, if you might have problems with that, I'm certainly there to support you and to see whether it also works for you. The other machine, by the way, we'll touch in a minute. That's basically the ZeroOS machine. It's basically another virtual machine running on top of OpenV Cloud, not running Ubuntu, but running ZeroOS. And that's also the very first time you see this. In the past, we always had running instance of ZeroS in VirtualBox, in VMware, in Packet.net, on OVH. Well, we have been running basically ZeroS on multiple places, but for this demo, I have an ZeroS installed on OpenV Cloud environment, which is quite interesting because this basically means that we are running the successor of the foundation of OpenV Cloud, which is Ubuntu, in the stack of OpenV Cloud version 2.17. So version 3.0, of course, will be based on 0S. And so that's quite nice to talk about. Okay, so what I did from that machine, simply these are the comments I used, quite straightforward. So I basically specified two variables, environment variables. One to specify the branch of the repository. So in the bash repository, I did specify, in my case, basically master. And I also specified that I wanted to use the master branch of JumpScale, which is always a little bit risky, but that's what I did. So I used the master branch of JumpScale. So I used twice master, master, and as you will check out the documentation, you could even drop these things then and have it installed in one single command if you really want to take everything from master. It's quite straightforward. Don't forget only to, once it is installed, to use the source command here. And then basically also you might need to, and probably you need to, update your bash profile, and like this by running your bash profile in a new session. And once that is done, and that's what I did, one single command, the z install underscore host underscore JumpScale 9 underscore full did basically, without any extra intervention from my part, have me a fully running JumpScale 9 environment. And that's the environment that I'm using here. This is really like what I'm using to interact with, to do the installation. So basically, in the picture, this blue machine here, that's the JumpScale 9 environment I've running now in my OpenV Cloud public production environment. Okay, then once that is done, there are multiple things to do in order to prepare. The very first thing you need to do is all related to itsu.online. And a little bit like I explained in my previous session about at your service and about setting up at your service and configuring at your service, we leverage itsu online, which is yet another project we open sourced like 1 year ago, and which is quite important in everything we do, for protecting all the APIs. Although at many levels we use itsu.online to secure access, authentication basically, of all the APIs. Now, of course, doing so requires some configuration, and I realize that this might make, and probably does so, make the installation a little bit more complex. Which at the end of the day, it is not more complex, it's just a matter of understanding what you do. And that's certainly what I will want to introduce to you today, so that you understand very clearly how all this is related. So why you need to do it and how you need to do it. Now, what you see here on the picture is that basically today, and I'll give you an update on that in the next session, because we are about to simplify things there. But in principle, this is how it works. You typically need to create an itsu.online organization. So what you do, you go to itsu.online, you log on, and there you will typically then go to, okay, you log in. I'm logged out, there's the timeout, of course. Let me log in again. And you can specify how you want to authenticate with the second factor. In my case, it's through the Google Authenticator application. So there we go. Okay, and there what you do is you go basically to the organizations. What I did, I created one single new organization. I did create the test organization, and what I did then, I made sure that that my two identities. So I have two identities in itsu.online. Typically only have one, but for test purposes, I ended up somehow with two identities, and I invited both of them into the organization. Of course, if you are creating a new organization, you automatically, so if you go here and you say organization, you say create a new one, automatically you will become the owner of the organization. So no need to still invite yourself or your second identity or the identity of somebody else into the group. But if you want to, it's simple. You click invite someone, you specify the username, email or phone number of the other identity, you want to give access to the organization. So that's the first thing that you need to do. Huh? You create an organization. Huh? In my case, what is called here org is what is called in my case test org. You can give it whatever name you choose. It's not at all important. And then you have basically 3 sub-organizations. Now, you will see in my case, I only have 2, but I will explain that in a minute. It's just another way of doing it, but both ways work. So you basically need to have 3 sub-organizations. By the way, you are free to create 3 independent organizations. So you're not it's not necessary to create one big organization and then create 3 sub-organizations. You could easily also create organization 1, 2, 3, and they would exist next to each other. So that's also very possible. It's up to you how to do it. I'd love to do it like this. It makes it more structured and it's clearer what you're actually trying to achieve. Now, why are you creating these 3 organizations? Because that's what it's all about, creating 3 organizations. The first organization you create is for protecting the host. Most importantly, what I mean with the host is, you know, when you install the 0S on the host machine, and with host I mean the host for the orchestrator, you need to install 0S. And you might remember that in order to install an orchestrator, you need to have an image. And in order to have an image, as I have clarified again in my slides, the next 2 slides, you need to specify the name of the organization. Huh? So you cannot, well, you can, but you typically download an 0S image by also specifying the name of the organization. And why is that? By doing so, you make sure, that's really the point here, you make sure that when this operating system boots, that you can only interact with it, yeah, if you are a member of the organization. So what you will see, let me immediately jump to it. If you later on download the 0S image for the host of the orchestrator, and remember the host of the orchestrator is this green one here, yeah, or in my environment is this machine here, this machine, yeah. What you want is when it boots, yeah, when it boots, that that you can only talk to it if you're a member of that organization. That's what you specify here. When downloading an image, you specify the name of an organization. This name of the organization needs to be the name of the organization you create here. And once that is done, let me show you, once that is done, once that organization is created, you will go to settings. No, you don't go to settings, but you just make sure that you are a member of it. Now, as you will see, that's all you need to do at this point. Make sure that you are a member. And later on, when we will interact with that host through the client, I will be using that, you will need to authenticate. And you authenticate through a JWT, a JSON Web Token, that typically needs to prove that you are a member of that organization. I'll come back on that, on how you get such a JWT, but it's already important to do actually this. The second organization is another organization, and let me tell you already today, you're completely free to do everything in one single organization. It's nice that you can split it in 3 organizations, which makes the solution that you end up with more sophisticated and gives you much more granularity in how you will configure the exact security scheme, let's call it. But it complicates things. And feel free to use one single organization. Now, the second organization, if you still really want to create 3 distinct organizations, is the organization that you set up to protect the orchestrator. And that's where it's all about, of course, because that's typically the only entry point to what you are about to install, the orchestrator. And more specifically, interaction through its RESTful API. Now, you protect interaction with the RESTful API by setting up an organization tool. And you will see later in the slides what you do specifically then at that level to use it. Because when you then call into the RESTful API, you need to send along again a JWT. This time the JWT doesn't need to prove that you are a member of the organization 2 or that you are a member of organization 1. This time it needs to be a JWT, yeah, that identifies organization 2. And I'll come back on that. It's basically based on an application key that you need to create when we need to do that. And then something completely new. There is a third organization you will want to create to protect the storage network. This is quite interesting, and today I'm only going to touch a little bit on it. This is like the first introduction also on some new concepts in the storage network. In 3 slides I'll cover that. You will see that also at the level of the storage backend, we introduce something we call storage namespaces. And per storage namespace, again, you can have membership, ownership at multiple sub-organizational levels in order to control access, to do the authorization, at the level of the actual content you want to protect. And the idea is that you create namespaces, and you can create as many namespaces as you want. And per namespace, you then define who has read, write, and admin access, things like that. It's all done nicely by leveraging its user line. It's a new concept we haven't been introducing yet, but you'll see it for the first time today. Okay? So remember that it's about creating 3 organizations. You could create only 1 organization for everything that I'm going to touch now. You could do everything in 1 single organization. It's, I think, better to do it in 3 organizations because it allows you to better understand what you're actually doing. But for demo purposes, once you know what you're doing, it's fine to do it in 1 single organization. Now, let's touch each of these organizations a little bit deeper. So remember the first organization, you need to create it in order to protect the host of the orchestrator. Because, yeah, you don't want somebody to have access directly to the 0S via a client API that is hosting the orchestrator. That's clearly not something you want to happen. On the other hand, of course, in order to install Orchestrator, you need to have access to the host. And that's why you need to create this organization. Now, remember that when setting up this organization, the only thing you needed to do until now is making sure that you are the owner, of course, or that whomever that needs to do the installation has access to it, meaning is a member of that organization. So what I say here, you need to be a member of this organization in order to install the orchestrator by interacting, and I will show you how, with the zero core of the host. The zero core, remember, is basically the principal process or service, or the first service that starts when you boot a 0S. It's basically the system D equivalent of 0OS. Now, what I also specify here is another reason today, another reason why you need to be member of this organization, but this will change in the future. That's why I already graded out, is that in order to use the AOS RESTful API, you will see that, that you need access there too. Now, let me tell you, normally you don't need access to the AOS RESTful API. Remember, you set up an orchestrator, and to the orchestrator you get everything done. But the orchestrator itself typically uses an internal AOS server, and you typically will not expose the RESTful API of the AOS server to the outside. But just know it today, that you can access that RESTful API if you are also a member of this organization, just for your information. Yeah. Now, this is something that you will have to do later as part of the installation. Of course, in order to install the Orchestrator, you need to have access, and that is done through the Python client. And the Python client, as you will see, uses a JWT, and that JWT needs to confirm you are a member. You are a member of that organization. And this is what you need to execute to do so. This is just one of the ways to do so, probably the way you want to do it. Now, what's so special about this? Well, it's not special, just for you. You need to specify a client ID and a client secret. Okay, what is this? Now, well, this is quite simple. You need to set a JWT that proves that you're a member of that organization. So this client ID needs to be about you. So what you need to do, you go to your profile, and you go more specifically to the settings. In the settings, what you do, you create an API key. You give it whatever name you want, and you get it created. See, this is the client ID, and this is a secret. So you have to save it. I won't save it now, of course, but this is what you need. This is the client ID, and this is a secret. So you need to copy these values into these environment variables. In the organization environment variable, you copy the name of the organization, yeah? And that's what is different in my case. I didn't create a organization one. What I did, I do everything at the level of the organization, the top organization. That's another way of doing it. What you could do in organizations, you go to test organization, and you see there is a structure like Orchestrator and the storage, but at the level of the test organization, at that highest level, which is the equivalent of org in my slides, I made sure that I have membership. Yeah? So that's the exact same thing, because then I automatically get rights at the lower levels too. That's another way of doing it, but it's nicely done. Okay? So here you specify typically the overall organization or organization one if you do it like in the slides. This gives you a JWT, and this JWT is what you will have to send along when using the Python client, and more importantly, when using the installation script, because the installation script will do it on behalf of you, and you need to prove that you're a member with access to that organization. Yeah. The second organization, remember, that is the organization you need to set up to protect the RESTful API of the Orchestrator. Not to confuse you, not the RESTful API of the AYS server. That's typically something that you don't want to have access to. That's internal stuff. But you need to set up organization 2 in order to protect the API, the REST API of the Orchestrator. Now, that's where you set up, let me show you again, this other organization, a sub-organization. I called it Orchestrator. So this is my organization 2. And what do you need to do there? One thing, you need to create an API key. Again, you click Add. You specify whatever name. It's not important. You make sure that you activate the client credentials support here, and you create it. It's that simple, okay? By creating this, it's saving it, you have it. And this is a secret that you need to remember. And the client ID in that case is test.orchestrator in my case. Now I'm going to delete that because I don't need it in this case. Okay. So going back to the slides. So you create the organization, you add an API key, and I'll come back to it in a later slide. As I said, this secret here, this is what you will need later when you want to use the RESTful API of the Orchestrator. And that's something you will typically do by using Insomnia. Remember, when using Insomnia, we always had to send a JWT. In this case, the JWT that you need to send is not about you proving and confirming that you're a member of organization 1. No, in this case, it's about proving that you have an access key that is part of organization too. And that's another way of creating the JWT, which I'll discuss when we are there. And then the third organization, remember, we have 3 organizations, and remember, you could also create it in one single organization. You're free to do so. The third organization, and that's where we introduce it, introduces this new concept of storage namespaces. We won't discuss this too much today, but the concept is simple. It's really simple. What you typically can do, the concept of a storage namespace is really a way for you to isolate storage and to protect storage access from one user to another user. Now, typically what you expect in such an environment is that you have an API to create storage namespaces. Well, it doesn't exist, that kind of API. Well, not at least today. The way you typically create a storage namespace is simply by creating sub-organizations at the level of each unit online and setting memberships. In my case, and let me give you an example, I have this organization tree, and there I have, you need to always call it zero store. You need to create a zero store sub-organization. I called it storage, but well, that works too. And then you can specify whatever name you want. And you can create as many namespaces as you want. You can create my namespace 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And then you typically create also a write one, a read one, a delete one. And then depending on your membership, when using the RESTful API to, for instance, access object storage, to name something we never touched upon now, and object storage, I mean something like S3. And if you're going to save something in the object store of 0S, so the equivalent of S3 in our system, you always need to specify the namespace of the storage that you want to use, the storage namespace. And depending on your membership again, you will get access or not access. And again, you can already guess it, you will need to send along a JWT proving that you're a member, for instance, of the right sub-organization in this structure, so that the API allows you to write something in that namespace. That's the way it works. Don't bother too much about that today. For the installation, you don't need to do much, apart from creating what I did. Let me show you. I simply, if you go back to the structure, I simply created at the highest level a storage sub-organization. And there I didn't do anything, apart from also, again, creating a storage API key, which we will use later. This is something that you don't need yourself, but internally, the orchestrator needs to have access to some internal APIs, for which, again, there is some protection. And that's where the storage API key comes into play. For now, it's not important. Just make sure that you create them. And then you copy them in the installation script. We'll come back to that. Okay. A lot of introduction on HU Online, a little bit boring maybe, but again, it's about security. It's important. It's not an afterthought, and it shows at least that we are serious about security. Now, finally, what really needs to be done now is you need to host. And in order to install a host, you need to download an image. And remember, you typically download an image from the Bootstrap service. The Bootstrap service, for those that still need a reminder, it's basically this website, this public website, where you can download ISO files, FE files, the kernel, whatever you need, whatever version, whatever branch. That's where you download basically the image for booting. Now, in our case, as always, remember what I already said, you need to specify a few things. First of all, you specify that you want an ISO file. Then you specify what version. I'm using master for your information. You specify the 0 tier, and the 0 tier is, remember, in my case, that's important. That's where I made a mistake, I think. You need to specify the 0 tier, this one, ZT2. because that's, well, to be honest, I'm not really sure, because that's where things got wrong. Because by creating it on I need, of course, access to the network. So by creating on zero tier one, yeah, by creating, I need to specify zero tier one clearly. Zero tier one is because otherwise I will never have access to this host from my client machine to do the actual installation. So going back here, you need to specify zero tier one, and again you need to specify the organization. Now in my case it's test org. Remember, test org. And let me check for sure, because it should be matching like this. Huh? See, like that. So that's what I need to specify. Huh? So I typically, I won't do it, I already have it doing it before. What you typically will then do is, let me show you, I have it here already. You typically have something like that, and you then download it. You specify master, the ID of the zero-tier network, and as an extra parameter, you specify the organization. That's what I did. Huh? Good. Now 32, let me check, because this is not correct for this purpose. If you go to my network, we need to have access. You see, zero tier one is 32. See? Right? Remember, at the end of this session, we need to download another image. Why? Because as part of the demo, we will be adding a machine. We will add a node. We will be adding, in the slide here, we will be adding one of those. And remember the way it works. When such a node starts, it will request access to the zero-tier network you specified. And it will be the orchestrator that will authenticate the join request. And from there on, it will be the orchestrator that will be controlling what happens on the 0S node. Yeah? So in that case, when I do so, you do not send ZT1, you do specify ZT2. Yeah? In my case, ZT2 is this one, and I need to send along this ID instead of what I was. So this is what you need to do to install the host, but later on, in order to install the image, you need to do that, and that's what I did wrong in my exercise. And maybe I will not even change it, because that means that it should work when I do that. Okay, let's keep it like that. Go back. Good. Where are we? Good. Once you have downloaded this image, you need to boot it. Now you can boot it everywhere. You can boot it wherever you want. Remember, I did boot it on top of OpenVCloud, the production environment. You could boot it in VMware. You could boot it in VirtualBox. That's really your choice. Huh? And the nice thing about this, when this OS then boots, and we'll touch that later when we boot one of the nodes, it will automatically join this zero-tier network. Now, when it does so, you will have to authenticate it yourself. You need to, well, not authenticate, you need to authorize its join request. I'm not going to do that because my machine already is joined, is already running. I don't need to do anything. Now, once that is done, you can literally do what is on the screen. You can test your installation. Now, let me show you. Let me take the command line. And this is what I will do as depicted here on the slide. From my workstation, I'm going to talk to the core 0 of the host. And this network IP address here, which one is this? Let us check. We go to zero-tier network 1. So we go to networks. We go to ZT1. In ZT1, what do we see? What do we see? The host. See? This is the machine we are talking about. Yeah? And this is the IP address, right? But remember that there is no way for me to talk to it without proving that I'm member of organization 1. So keep that in mind. That is important. Huh? And how do you do that? Let me exit this, just so that you see it once more. What you need to do, okay, and that's a pity because now everything is on the screen. You need to basically take my personal client secret. I need to delete it now, and request a JWT. So that's the first thing you need to do. So echo JWT, and there I have it. Yeah, this thing is what I need for testing. So what I do, I go to jump scale interactive shell. So that's what you get. You set JWT, you set it to copy it like this. Well, there are other ways to do it, of course, but well, not sure. I need to do it this like this. It equals this like this, right? Copy it. Then I'm not going to try to act as a smart guy. I'm just going to copy the comments. I have them here. I basically need to have access to the client like this, right? Then I set the server address. So that's the IP address of the host. The first thing you always can do, well, you connect to it. That's quite straightforward, like this. Copy. Now, of course, JWT, like this, right? All right. And then we check it. That's a simple test. Ping it, and we get the pong back. The next thing I do is let's check whether there is already a container on it. You can say container .list, and then it lists all the containers. Now, what do you expect? There is already a container, namely because I already did installation up front, so I won't do it again for the sake of time. So I invite you to do so, exactly what I do. But that will be the result of the installation. The container will have been installed for you, right? Yes. Now, still I'm going to do it. And there is a reason for that. And let me explain. Let me be very open and transparent with you. If you check the picture here, the end result is that you have a container, this one, with the orchestrator. And this container, most importantly, needs to be connected to the second zero tier. If not, it can never control what happens there. So if even a new node would send a join request to this zero tier network 2, basically become part of the cluster, the orchestrator would never be able to authorize that request. So it needs access. Now let us just test in zero tier where, well, he has access. So if you go to zero tier, let's have a look. Then here we are in zero tier 1. Yeah, we see in zero tier 1 that it is connected over there. See, with this IP address. Yeah. And what so it's there, which is good. And this is the unique identifier. So remember the 2B. What I expect if the installation goes good, and I go to networks, is that it also connects and joins into the other zero tier network. Right? And what I see here, it's not. So there is clearly something wrong with my setup. On the other hand, I see the orchestrator here, which is okay. So then again, it's okay. So maybe it is okay. Maybe let's trust it and let's not make it do it again. So I'm a little bit confused only because of the address. Should I watch this one? Is this another address? Probably it is. There will certainly be a reason, something I don't yet understand very well, but probably it is correct. So I see that the orchestrator, the container, is nicely joined in the two networks. Again, this one is the important one. Yeah. This one is the one which is convenient because this will allow me then also to use the RESTful API over the zero tier network, the first one. Okay. Good. So this means I'm not going to do the installation again for now. This is the only thing that I take a small risk. And what you typically do, what you then typically do anyhow to test, that's what I explain here in my slides. You will typically, what I did, list the container. In your case, it should be empty. What you typically need to do then, you could also use, and that's strange maybe, the Orchestrator client. So what you do is, instead of going to from 0S core 0, you go to 0S Orchestrator API. This is quite strange. Let me do that. Because how can you talk to the orchestrator through the Orchestrator client when the orchestrator is not yet installed? Well, you can't. However, the Orchestrator client, which is available in that namespace, this Python namespace or module, let's say, still allows you to use the client. And the client, apart from using the RESTful API, also allows you to talk to the core 0. So allows you basically to do things that you typically do through the core 0 client. But there you can do more things, more interesting things, and that's why I typically use that. And what you typically will want to do is what I show you here. Again, you need to connect like this. So it's the same thing. You use the same JWT and the same server, so this will work. So Node is nicely attached, so you can check things like name. And you get a name, or I don't know what is useful in that case. You probably can also check for containers through this environment. You can get containers is there, you see, containers, right? And then you can do a list, the same thing. It's another names, another API, and you see my container with this name is already there. See, this the same thing. Now, what you will do there, and what I typically will want to do, is, and I'm not going to do it now, and let me add it also in the slides. If you're doing it again, like from scratch, or no, reinstalling it, you will want to reboot basically the host, just so that that we really start from scratch. You then will wipe the disks, because otherwise you will remember the container data, and then this is a small comment I don't want to talk too much about, but you will enable persistency. No, enabling persistency will basically make sure that everything you do with Orchestrator is also saved to disk, and by saving it to disk means that afterwards, if you reboot, everything is still there, and that you need to do the wipe disk. It's just the few commands that you typically will want to use if you're resetting your installation, leveraging the same host. And that, to be honest, was basically what I was hoping to do now, but I'm not going to take this risk, because this will take us yet another half an hour to do everything. And well, let's go forward and see what happens. Okay, so these are the comments, especially this one, is what you can try to do in order to test your 0S host and check whether it's nicely accessible from your workstation for doing the actual installation. Okay, the actual installation. We are like almost talking for 1 hour, and now we are finally out using the script. Remember, the script is this new thing that replaces the manual way of installing. So this is thing that you see here. You go to the 0S organization. There you go to the Orchestrator, and there you have a new directory, auto setup, which already concludes some first developer written documentation. So certainly, probably the documentation most of you will want to see. And it is basically explaining two things. It's explaining that you need to do two things. It's explaining that there are two scripts. The first script is really to create the F-list, and the second is to create basically to do the installation. Now, instead of going through the repository, let me show you here. It's in a summary. The first script, I did use it once, and it was not really necessary. I only used it once to test it. Is what you typically would use in order to create the F-list. What do you mean here? Remember the F list, that's typically the equivalent of what you have in Docker with an image. You need an image. Well, an image in our case is an F list. Yeah? You need to create an F list. Now this F list is created by using this script. And for those that are interested to learn about it, you can see in that script how exactly we leverage jump scale to create these F lists. So it's quite educational for those of you who love to learn more about it, to check out the script, how it is being written. Especially later, if you will create an AOS actor template, it will be interesting for you to understand how the actor template works exactly to do that. Now, what does it do? Well, what does it take as arguments? 2 arguments. You need to specify, optionally, the branch name of the orchestrator you want. And for those that remember, the branch name of the 0S nodes that you will accept to join the cluster. And remember, we have, and we discussed it in the past, this blueprint, the configuration blueprint, where you specify the versions of the 0S nodes that you accept. Now, in my case, I'm all using master. Yeah. And this means that I even omitted both of them. I did even not specify these 2 arguments. So automatically I end up with an F list which contains the configuration blueprint, basically, saying that the orchestrator will only authorize join requests to the zero-tier network if the node is running a master branch version of the 0S node. That's the result. Remember that, because if you would want to use alpha 8, remember in my slides here, if you want to use the alpha 8 version, which is the current stable version, by the way, the alpha 8 version for the node, then you need to make sure that you also specify alpha 8 later when downloading an image for the node, and that you specify here, or that you recreate your own F list. If you're simply going to take the pre-built F list that I used, yeah, which is based on master, clearly a join request will never get authorized by the orchestrator. So just remember that. So again, this is all very logical, you just need to know. Now, also know that when you create an F list using this script, you still need to do one extra manual step. And maybe I should include a slide about that too, just so that you understand how we do it. I covered that also in the past. You then need to merge this F list with 2 other F lists, with the Ubuntu F list and the jump scale F list. Because basically this F list only contains the metadata in this small database of the files in order to install the orchestrator. The orchestrator on its own needs jump scale, and jump scale needs Ubuntu. So these are 2 other F lists which are available in the hub. Yeah, sorry, in the hub. Yes, and through the hub there is a new way that allows you just to specify the F lists, and it will merge them for you. Very nice. That's something certainly we need to cover later. Now, for now, you know, to win time, focus on master. That's what I did, and immediately skip to the next step and leverage the master version of the F list, where the merging, everything is done. You just need to grab that file. Okay. And how exactly does that work? Well, I'll show it in the next, this is what you actually will do, but let me introduce it, high level. What does this script actually do? It does actually a lot of things. And for those that already did do the installation manually in the past on top of the Docker container, they will recognize some of these things, because that's what, of course, this script automates. First of all, it connects from your workstation running JumpScale 9 to the 0OS host. In order to do so, clearly, it needs to have a JWT proving that you are a member of Organization 1. Because the installation will be done on behalf of you, and you are a member of Organization 1, and Organization 1 was specified when you downloaded the image for the host. So otherwise you will never get access. And testing that it works, that's what you did here. Eh? You specified here the JWT testing, so there you're already sure that you won't get into problems. Then it will start a container. It will start a container based on the F list. And that's the F list we saw on the previous slide. He will automatically, this container will automatically join the zero-tier network. Now, basically I need to say will join two zero-tier networks. Remember here, it will join both this zero-tier network and that zero-tier network. This one is the important one, the other one is the optional one, right? Good. And then it will also start an SSH server. So remember that the host itself is not accessible to SSH. The host itself does not have SSH installed, and you typically will not want to install it. And the whole idea with ZeroS host, for also on the level of the nodes, is that it doesn't have any attack surface. It only contains the things that are needed to do actually what it needs to be done. Yeah. So, but the containers, of course, in this case, is special container. It's a container running the orchestrator. There we need SSH access as part of the installation, because parts of the installation will be done through SSH. An SSH key will be created, public and private site, which is needed later on. Then we will use the It's Unit Online settings you specified through arguments that you pass in the auto bootstrap pipe, and use them to configure jump scale and AOIS. And again, for those that have done the previous sessions, both on jump scale and AOS, they might remember that also at the level of AOIS, you need to do all kinds of security stuff, where you need JWTs and It's Unit Online configuration. This is all done for you automatically, just by using the preparation steps I have in my slides. This is not completely new, but we will be doing this more and more, which is quite important, a component of the solution. What it also will do, it will contact the upstream Git repository and clone it or create it. Now, what this is all about, the idea is that this is a very important component. Because the idea is that when the orchestrator once runs, it will do all kinds of work for whomever asks the orchestrator to do work. But imagine that, and it will happen, of course, that for some reason the orchestrator goes down. In that situation, in that event, what you want is that another orchestrator can take over the work. This can happen easily because the state that of the orchestrator is in the cloud, is in a Git repository. And that's basically the Git repository you need to create up front. And you need to link to the container here, or to the container, to the orchestrator, so that it can do the upstream upload, basically, of whatever is happening in the orchestrator. Then, of course, it will start AOIS, it will start the orchestrator and the caddy server, typically for doing things like HTTPS, of course, and also for exposing, for instance, the RESTful API on another endpoint than, for instance, the zero-tier network 1, which is convenient that you have it there, but typically you will want to expose it also on other endpoints and secure them to HTTPS. Okay. Then, furthermore, it will do whatever we have been doing manually. It will execute the blueprints, the configuration blueprint, the network blueprint, and the bootstrap blueprint. All these blueprints typically then translate into, remember my previous session, AOIS services that run and are hosted, as I call, or live, as I said in my previous session, in the internal AOIS server that does do the actual self-healing work, that does do the actual lifecycle management of all the components. And this is where AOIS does its work. And you need to feed it with, remember, blueprints to say what it needs to do. This thing is what is still documented in the setup documentation on how to do it manually. This is done for you automatically. Now, this is then what you need to execute. You can copy paste it, of course. This is actually literally what I copy paste it. Of course, I did do some layout stuff, but still you can copy paste it. I've put it like that for you. The last thing that you need to specify is what you expect most is, of course, the address on the hub, and not the Bootstrap source, but the hub, the 0S hub of the F-list, the merged F-list, so including also the Ubuntu and the jump scale metadata, yeah, and then all the other things. You need to specify, first of all, the 0S node. This is the IP address on 0 tier 1 of your host. Then you need to send along the JWT proving that you are a member of organization 1. You specify whatever organization name. Then you specify the 0-tier network of the Orchestrator ID. Now, this is important also. This is because this also means that you might expose the 0-tier network on another. That you might expose the RESTful API of Orchestrator also on another 0-tier network. Again, for my convenience, I did specify the 0-tier network 1. This is how it works, and this is how it certainly worked for me. I see certainly other options popping up in the future. Then this is then the repository. Maybe I should add a slide on about that. What you simply do, you go to GitHub, for instance, you create a new repository, and then you typically end up with such an address as you see here, and you copy this address to that environment variable. That's what I did. Then you specify, this is important, an organization, and this is basically the name of the organization 2. And remember, organization 2 is the one we create to protect the RESTful API of the Orchestrator. Because when you then send HTTPS requests or HTTP requests to the RESTful API of the Orchestrator, you need to send along a JWT. And this JWT, as you'll see later in my slides, is not the same JWT you use to do the installation, but it's a JWT that you got from the secret that you got created from an application key at the level of this organization. So it's another organization. So remember that. This is a little bit ugly, and this will probably change in the future, but still it's important that you understand what happens here. This is another client ID and secret you need to send. Why? Because, remember, the Orchestrator at some point in time needs to talk to the AYS server. Now, the AYS server in turn exposes for that a RESTful API. And this RESTful API in turn is also protected. So even the Orchestrator is not privileged here. The Orchestrator, in order to talk to the AYS server, the internal AYS, needs to prove that he has the right to do so. In order to do so, JWT needs to send along by the Orchestrator to the internal AYS server. So the Orchestrator needs to be able to create that JWT, and needs to be able to refresh this JWT because it will, of course, at some point in time not be valid anymore. Now, today, remember, and that will probably change, you need to create for that purpose in organization 1. Well, what you need to do, and that's what Ugly is about, you need to send along your own personal, what you typically do in your own personal identity, you create another API key, not the same, another one, and then you send the client ID or application ID and secret here. Because the JWT needs to be proved that you again a member. That's what is Ugly about, but that's how it works in my case. Then you specify the networking configuration. You can, well, this is of course specific to your environment. So, but then again, this is what you can do. And I also invite you to check the documentation of the Bootstrap on all the options you have there. Basically, what I specify here is that my orchestrator needs to connect to an internal VLAN we have here with this VLAN tag. So this is the internal network configuration that works for my environment, so that it's something that I can use. I feel that this might be something that I need to do in another session for a fully disconnected neutral environment, so that I can show you how you do that, for instance, on virtual box, for instance. Then remember, there's a lot of parameters you need to send. All the storage related things. Well, these things here, all the storage related things. You need to create a client ID and a secret at the level of the organization tree. You need to specify namespace. Well, I did, as you can see, create this one. So we just create this one. For now, it's all okay. And also an organization. So, and that's the name of the organization. In my case, it's storage, remember? So just remember. These two are also important, of course. The first one is a zero-tier network 2, so that the system knows to manage the other network. And that might be something that I did do wrong in my setup. That's something I need to test later. I need to test in my setup. That's the only thing. Well, no, it might be correct, but clearly this one should be the address of the other one. If not, it will not be able to authorize join requests, and that's where he needs this one, by the way. This token is what you get at your account level. I'm not going to show it, but at the account level of your zero tier, you go to accounts, and you can create API tokens. You create an API token, and by sending this API token to the installation script, you basically forward your token to the orchestrator, so that the orchestrator can authorize join requests into that zero-tier network. It's so logical, but that's the way it works. That's about it. And this is what you need to execute. And remember, even if you will create an actor template for that, typically you will see these same parameters coming back. Now, let me already announce it today. What we will do very soon, this week, we will implement all kinds of defaults. For instance, for quick setup, probably you don't want to create 3 separate organizations. You will want to do everything in one organization. And then this really will strip out at least half of everything that you see here out of the attributes. Sorry, all of the attributes basically I need to pass. But for completeness, I think this is certainly correct to do it like this. Okay, this is an example of what I did, and I see I have a mistake here. This one is a wrong one, because that's. Well, this is what I send along. So don't include the SSH, by the way. That was something that would only work for an internal Git server we have here. And this is what works for my setup by using a personal Git repository. So I could go to GitHub. You go to my personal Git organization, and there I have a new repository with this name, and this is like the connection string. Okay, this is what I did. And what it will give you an environment that works. Now, in order to test it, and we are almost there with the slides, in order to test it, you need to add a node, because everything is working, and you can, let me show you what you get as a result. And the way to check whether, the first thing that you do in order to test whether it works, you go to networks, and you go, in my case, to zero-tier network 1, because that's where I wanted to expose the REST API. You basically should see, you should basically see, wait, and that's where I'm confused. See, that's where I would have, because it doesn't make sense to copy this one. Let me still try it. This will clearly not work, but in a way that's what I wanted. So that's something I need to check, and that's what I think that I did do wrong in my exercise. Remember here, in this exercise here, you need to specify here, and that's my mistake in my config. Sorry, not this one. You need to specify, where is it? This one. This one. I think that I specified there by mistake Z2, Z0 tier 2. Yeah? Now, this is not a big issue. I'm just realizing, because what I can simply do, I can go to Z tier 2. Let me check. I go to networks, go to Z tier 2, and the orchestrator is indeed live there. Here it is. And this IP address, okay, and let me do it. This IP address should show me the RESTful API. See? See? Or when I go to Insomnia, you will believe me, I'll be able to use this RESTful API. Yeah? Now, the final thing that we need to do, go back to the slides. Let me just explain what I just explained. So in my setup, this connection here does not exist by mistake, because I specified that also the REST API is also only available on 0 tier 2 and not on 0 tier 1. So this one is what I did as a mistake. But now, what we need to do now as a final step to play around with it, and I'm curious because I didn't try this, because I was blocked on the previous problem. What I need to do is add a node. Now, remember, adding a node, in my case, this node, one of these, needs to connect in 0 tier 2. Remember 0 tier 2? This is this one. This is 0 tier 2. We remember it's 7.1. Okay. I have it ready here. Remember? I'm specifying the test organization, the same one, and 7.1. Yeah. Okay. So downloading this, let's do this, will give me an image. It's downloading that I can now use on VirtualBox. Let's do it. Let's get to VirtualBox, and let's create an demo machine like this. Select Linux, continue, accept all the defaults. Okay, you can always then here in storage add more disks if you want to. More disks if you really want to create new disk, right? To be honest, not sure why it's really necessary, but okay, you do so. But most importantly, you go to the IDE controller and you select the image you just downloaded. You go to downloads. This is the image I just downloaded. You open it, you select it, okay, and you start a machine, right? Now, as a result of that, the machine is starting here. Let's have it there. And what you should see in 0 tier 2, right? It should pop up. So it should pop up, and the orchestrator should be able to see it and authorize access. That is what should happen. And if it doesn't work, as always, this is demo, always risky. It's part of the experience, I guess. It's probably something that is still wrong in my setup, but I'll see. And it is booting, and you see here already it's joining into this address in this in the 7.1. So this is the correct. So we will. It will pop up here in a moment. Yeah, you will see it popping up, and it's then the work of the orchestrator to to see that. That's the Bootstrap service, remember, that should see that. And should, there it is. I could click it myself, but I won't. And that's where I'm praying now, because it's now the orchestrator that should authorize access, and it should end up with a cluster of one single node. Well, basically two nodes. One of them is hosting the orchestrator, and the other one is basically hosting. Well, is this one. No, well, it doesn't happen. Maybe I need to be patient. I don't know. But this is what is supposed to happen now. Or I again made a mistake in my parameters that I supplied. That's what I say. They mixed up some of the parameters as preparation to this session. And that's, I guess, which is the case today. The only thing I can do to finish the demonstration, go back to the slides, and in the slides, the final thing is that you then still will want to use the Insomnia client, which, well, I won't do now, but basically what you do there is first get the JWT. Remember, this time it should be a JWT based on organization 2. Yeah. So you go to organization 2, and not in storage, but here you go to organization 2, authorize like this, and 109. You go here. You go to organization 2 in my test org. Go there. You go to structure. You go to orchestrator, and there you should create an API, and this value is a secret, yeah. And then test.orchestrator is what you will pass as the client ID. So this will be test.orchestrator, and then the secret you just saw. You will execute this command. It will create a JWT. It will put it on the screen, and that JWT you then pass in Insomnia. You basically here you configure your environment, and you copy the JWT here, this one. And by doing so, this will not work, but I can test. By doing so, then you go to this thing here that I shared in the past, and you go to list nodes, and it should normally show you, and this will show a forbidden, of course, but it should normally then show you this first node that just got added. So that's what the demo should show. In my case, remember, it didn't work simply because I did make a mistake in mixing up 0 tier and 0 tier 1 and 0 tier 2 in my setup. That's something I will fix for my own testing after the session. Now, this is the end of the session. Just to put it again into perspective, where are we going? So this one is clearly a script showing how you can automate the things we did do in the past. Not only automating them, but also installing it on a 0S node instead of a Docker container as we did do in the past. And that's the thing that we covered today. This code is perfectly ready now to be packaged into an AYS template. That's the topic of the last session. It will be interesting, and I will discuss that with you, how the same thing would look then when we package it in an AYS actor template and then use an AYS server to do the installation for us. The same thing we will do for Open vCloud, because Open vCloud is just another workload that we can deploy on top of 0S. Geert, the engineering boss here, is testing with this this week. This one will clearly also be packaged in an AYS actor template so that you can deploy Open vCloud on top of a 0S cluster. Just as you install an orchestrator, you will be install Open vCloud there. through AYS. And then, of course, it might sound a bit strange, you could also install AYS server on top of ZeroS, which we basically did because as part of the Orchestrator container we just installed, it also comes with an internal AYS server. But at some point in time, you will want to install your own AYS server for other stuff. For instance, to install another cluster, for instance. It's a bit chicken and egg. And also there, you will typically, again, use an AYS template. That one is not ready yet, but that's certainly something we will do. And then all related, you will then create all kinds of other AYS services related to using ZeroS. More specifically, you will do some monitoring health checks in order to automatic updates and all. And then we are almost ready for beta 1. What I need to do next week is give you a view on what that means, where we are, what the roadmap is on beta 1. And that's basically the point where I'll also be covering things about new things in storage, new things about the health checks. That's what I plan to do next session. For the next session, what I mean this week, the next session will be more about these things, but for this week I also plan still to do one session. It's like a follow-up session of today, where I will add some extra details. I will probably do the full installation while you watch. I will have tested it, and probably some of you will be doing in the meantime the same thing. I already got questions about the Z tools, so just to get us all on the same page, I'll do another session covering a little bit the same thing, but doing a little bit more demo than I did today, doing the exact demos, full installation from scratch. That's what I plan to do next session, probably Thursday, because I know many people don't work on Friday. And even in Egypt, some of you already have a day off already on Thursday. So Thursday might even not be an issue for you. So it will be Thursday or Friday where I'll be covering again most of this. Voila, I've been talking again too much, I guess. That's because I love this work. I love my job. I love ZeroS. I love you, of course. And I love your questions. You have questions. Shoot. Who's still there? Who's not sleeping or bored? Nobody?
Hey, you've no questions this side.
No? Hey, who's still there? I see some videos here of Mark, of course. He's a big fan. Huh? Then somebody without the name, Nikolai. Okay, good. No questions? No questions at all, guys?
We need to be tried. We need to try it ourselves.
Okay, we will do follow-up privately after the session. I'll always share with you the recording on the YouTube channel. The slides I'll also share with you. And I'll make sure that you know by tomorrow when I do a follow-up session on this one, going a little bit more in depth and doing more demos and cover things that you might have asked me today or tomorrow. So thank you very much and see you soon. Bye-bye.